Welcome to episode 268 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat footy media, culture, and connection with Richmond FC's Simon Matthews.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who's playing podcast on his Amazon Echo, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. You can find me on all things on the internet, normally by my name, Sean Callanan, C-A-L-L-A-N-A-N, on Twitter or at Sports Geek as well on most platforms. Or you can catch me the old-fashioned way, email, not fax, as we do discuss in this episode, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. And don't forget, you can send in your Q&A questions for the Q&A episodes, which happen most Fridays. sportsgeekhq.com/questions. Thanks to Amir, Travis, Doug, Tim, Rishi, Pat, Paul, Sally for filling the pipeline of questions. I'm going to record some Q&A episodes after this one. Before I get into my chat with Simon Matthews from the Richmond Football Club, I just want to quickly chat about the Patreon campaign. The Patreon campaign is the way that you can support the content that we produce in the sports business space, like the podcast that you're listening to right now, the Q&A podcast that I just discussed, and also our newsletters that come out on a weekly basis on a Wednesday morning, Sports Geek News. And you can read everything that I read. The Patreon campaign helps pay for the costs, hosting of the podcast, and paying for my voiceover work with DJ Joel, James, my podcast editor, and the like. So if you would like and get value out of the podcast, you can support it by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Thank you for those who have done so already. If you're a brand or a partner or a vendor to the sports marketing digital technology space, you can reach my Sports Geek audience by signing up as a silver or gold supporter in the Patreon campaign. Their links are in every single show notes, including this one, and every single Sports Geek News. So you see all those logos at the bottom of my email, the Sports Geek News. They are all supporters. Please click on them. Check them out. Really do appreciate those who have signed up. sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Now I want to get into my chat with Simon Matthews from the Richmond Football Club. They play in the AFL, the Australian Football League. They are one of the biggest clubs in the land. They're lucky enough to have won the last two of the last three premierships, the championship game being the grand final. They've won two of the last three, and they have a massive fan base recently, cracking the 100,000 member mark. So in this chat, talk about Simon's career in the world of footy, working in two different big clubs here in Melbourne, and also understanding the machinations of the media and how it has changed, as well as how do you connect with an audience that big and a membership that big on a real and emotive level. Here is my chat with Simon Matthews from the Richmond Football Club. Very happy to be here on a sunny Melbourne afternoon at the Swinburne Centre, or Punt Road Oval for those who know Melbourne. We can hear the buzz of Punt Road in the background. I'm here with Simon Matthews. Welcome to the podcast.
Good to chat, Sean.
So first of all, before we dive into the recent successes of Richmond, which have been few over the last couple of years, first of all, how did you get your start in the sports business?
It's actually a very bizarre journey, my journey to where I am today. I actually did biotechnology, believe it or not, at RMIT when I finished Year 12. So I was spending time in a laboratory doing genetic engineering and industrial microbiology, believe it or not, and quickly decided that wasn't where I wanted to see my future, and did a graduate diploma in education. And then I ended up pouring beers in a pub for a year, which, to be honest, was probably the best education of all in terms of... a
lot of wisdom over the drip tray.
Yeah, absolutely, plenty of that. So then I ended up writing a column for the local paper down in Geelong. I grew up in Geelong, so I was writing for the Geelong News, which was the free paper, and then went into the Geelong Advertiser covering football, and ended up getting paid to go and watch Gary Ablett Senior play Geelong. And as a Geelong supporter, you couldn't have wished for anything better. He was just brilliant to watch. And
for our American listeners, Gary Ablett's the closest thing to Michael Jordan of
absolutely,
AFL.
Absolutely, the greatest of all time, I would have thought. And so to spend time watching him and writing was a great grounding, I think, for storytelling, which I think is such a critical part of what we need to deliver as a footy club. And from there I went to Essendon Football Club as the media manager, and then after 10 years there, Brendan Gale rang me up to see if I'd come over to Richmond, and here I am 10 years later.
So you've just been journalist into the media game, and obviously seen over the last 20 years how much the media, going from managing, talking to journos at the Herald Sun and 2 or 3 papers to now, the landscape that is.
Yeah.
What's the Richmond team look like now?
We've got a really significant team now. The digital team would be there'd be 10 in our digital team. We've just doubled the size of our multimedia team to 6. So we've got a lot of people on the tools now. We're really keen to push the long form storytelling more from a strategic perspective. We think that's important. From a club perspective, the media team is 3 or 4 depending on what time of year it is. So. So when I started at Essendon, it was a team of 1, and press releases were going out via fax, which makes me feel very, very old. But it's changed. It's changed dramatically. It's a very different landscape now. I think the news has really morphed into a lot more opinion-based stuff, particularly given I think clubs have got better at managing their own news cycles through their own digital platforms as well now. So it's a very different world to what it was 20 years ago, but every bit as exciting. So how does a media guy like yourself evolve into that space? Because you would have gone from, I've got to give these snippets to, the Mike Sheens, the Scotty Palmers of the world to make sure it's on the back page of the Sunday paper to now going, well, hang on, we want to break this on our channels. How have you been managing those relationships, but then I guess shifting where the media is going? Yeah, I mean, relationships are the key with media, full stop. I think that you need to have really good relationships with all media all the way through at all levels. It doesn't mean you're always going to get the right result from a story perspective, but you do need to be able to pick up a phone and have an honest conversation with someone. I think that's critical to the media management piece. But I think in terms of how it's rolled into our business, it's really understanding what your business strategies and the importance of bringing sets of eyeballs to your platforms. And then subsequently monetising those. So I think it was a change in mindset that, we needed to bring a lot of this stuff in-house, control it, stretch it as far as we could, and then monetise accordingly. And then so from a fan point of view and with recent success, we'll talk about grand finals in a bit, Richmond's always been a big club and it's sort of got bigger over the last 5 years. How much is important for your media channels to be talking directly to that 100,000 that are your members? Oh, look, that's critical, absolutely critical. I mean, we talk as a football club, our stated purpose is connection. We want to connect and connect to thrive and win is what we talk about. And there's no more cost-effective way and increasingly innovative way to do that than through your digital platforms. And the better we can do that, more effectively we can do that, we can bring people closer to our football club. I mean, our supporter base is sizable. It's probably not as big as some people would think, but what we have got right, I think, is building that engagement piece and that connection piece and really bringing our fans close to this football club and having them feel a part of the journey. I think that engagement piece is really important because everyone can chase the big number. Like, this is how many total we've got, but you've got, my family's one of them. My mum is and all of her sisters are diehard, Richmond fans. So much so that my mum and dad had a prenup where my mum acquired all the girls and my dad acquired all the boys for Collingwood. Right. So strong was that bond that I didn't even think. I told my daughter she backed for Richmond. And so it's she had second round draft picks. My mum, she's done quite well. So my mum and sister and my daughter are all mad Richmond fans. But it's a balancing act between how do we grow this piece as big as we can, but also we want to keep talking to these fans that have been through thick and thin. Tiger faithful for a long time. Absolutely, I think that's really important. I mean, we talk a lot about the cold metrics and the warm metrics, and I think that's what you're referring to. That you can talk about big numbers and feel really good about them, but the metrics that point to engagement are probably far more significant in our mind because they are pointing to an engaged audience. And an engaged audience is a connected audience. And that parlays into the commercial return as well.
So how do you have that conversation with Brendan, who's a savvy CEO, and you say, hey, we did this piece of content, it's a long form piece of content, and 10,000 people viewed it. And when you see the big numbers, this is how many people are following Richmond, it's like, but it's really important that 10,000 people watch this 40-minute video or this 15-minute video, and it's, you've got them deep. Like, is there been a bit of retraining of what the metrics are at sea level? Because you would have gone through that. Let's just collect all the likes. Let's just collect all the all of the social fans. But now it's actually more important to have a smaller number deeply engaged.
Yeah, it is, and it probably also ties in, with our purpose as a football club as well. And I think when you think through your purpose, it probably does dictate what metrics are important to you. So we talk a lot about. We're a football club. There is nothing more important than winning games of football.
Yeah.
But our purpose as a club is much broader than that. I mean, football clubs are effectively set up for the community, by the community. So it's important that I think as an organisation we reflect things that are important to our constituency.
Yep.
And that then dictates how you shape your business. So a lot of the stuff that we've done, we've been particularly strong from a brand marketing perspective around our community activity. And we work particularly closely with the Indigenous community. We've got a wonderful charity partnership with the Alana and Madeline Foundation. We've just established the Basher Hooley Foundation, which will play a really important role in building bridges between Islamic and mainstream Australia. We partner the Midsummer Festival. We partner the World Wildlife Foundation. So there are all these things that we do that actually talk to our purpose as a football club. Now, that dictates that some of your content is going to be different to knees, hamstrings and ankles.
Yep.
And it also dictates that some of the numbers won't be as big, but from a message and a connection with your fans, it's telling them a really important story about what your purpose is as a football club.
Yep.
And I think that is well understood by our board. It's very well understood by our CEO. And the benefits that flow on from getting that right are enormous.
Yeah, and very much that being inclusive, because you're doing those different things in different communities, embracing those communities and saying you can be part of the club, which is counter to the, hey, we've got to hit up every single person that wears yellow and black.
Exactly. And I think that's why the diversity inclusion piece is increasingly important for us, and probably the whole game, to be honest. I mean, the face of Australia is changing dramatically, and I think some sports have probably suffered from not getting into it early enough. I mean, there's probably an argument as the AFL and us as well thought about the changing face of the population and that diversity piece early enough. But it's something that we're working towards now, and I think that's where the opportunity lies in terms of fan growth.
It is unique, and sort of talking about that stuff around diversity and the stuff you've done in the Indigenous space. Richmond presented at the United Nations. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Oh, it was a wonderful opportunity for the club to head to New York, and there was three of us who headed over there, a couple of young people as well.
So how did it come about? Who invited you?
The National Congress of Australia's First People, who were a partner of the club, and they went over to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous issues, and they wanted us to talk about the power of sport to build bridges between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities.
Yep.
And I think that's something the game's done really well. They were particularly interested in Dreamtime at the G, which is obviously a game that is basically founded in celebration of what Indigenous Australia has brought to the game of Australian rules football. So we talked a little bit about that with the cohort over there, and wonderful experience, and it gave us, I guess, great confidence to keep stepping into the space. We think it is a really important part of who we are as a football club now, the work we do with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. We've got the Korangamiji Institute based here at Richmond Football Club, which works with 13 to 17-year-old Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth around cultural connection, resilience, and how they can make the most of opportunities that come up in their life. So it's become a really important part of what we are as a football club, and the trip to UN was just wonderful affirmation, I guess, of what we do and the opportunity that sport provides more broadly. And
again, going back to the part of being inclusive, you've obviously got some terrific Indigenous talent playing and have played for Richmond over the years, and there's been a lot in the AFL. How does that part of the playing group sort of look at the participation that Richmond's putting in that, and those efforts they're putting in that space.
It's a really good point, and it is. I think that when we get young Indigenous players come into our football club now, they feel culturally safe.
Yep.
And I think that's really important. I think they see the work we do in the KGI. They see we've got the Melbourne Indigenous Transition School is also based here at Richmond Football Club.
Yep.
I don't think there wouldn't be another sporting organisation in Australia that would have a licensed school on site.
Yep.
So there's kids around. So I think that when you walk into our club, you do feel that sense of community. Mm-hmm. And particularly for young Indigenous players coming in, they see a club committed. They see a club that's authentic, and I think that's a great start to their journey at Richmond Football Club.
And the converse of that is you've also got young kids coming in that probably that aren't Indigenous, that don't know a lot of the info and understand the problems that they faced and the issues that they've faced. Is that also helped the wider club, because it's not a Indigenous, it's not an Indigenous issue, it's an Australian issue.
Absolutely. And that's the power of sport, to create awareness, and Dreamtime's done that brilliantly now for 12 years, and it's certainly critical to us. I mean, today is the 12th anniversary of Kevin Rudd's apology to the stolen generation. We sent an email out to all staff today just to remind them that today was the 12th anniversary. So it is embedded as part of who we are as a football club, and hopefully serving the greater good.
So we have danced around it, partly because I'm a Collingwood supporter and we did lose, but 2017 you won the flag in super impressive fashion, and then you backed it up again in last year. Obviously two completely different experiences. 2017, what was it like going through that? And I know Richmond has won flags in the past, but it sort of would have felt for a lot of the group here, it was like the first time and the breaking through and years of hard work. What was it like in that build up to that game?
Oh, look, it was just remarkable. It was a remarkable week. It was a week that we really did work very hard to try and enjoy, and that came from Damien as the senior coach, Damien Hardwick, and it came from the CEO, Brendan Gale. It was really important that we enjoyed the week. I mean, we'd played finals, I think, 3 of the 4 years previously. Yep. And probably overplayed it a little bit and didn't get the result ultimately. But it was a different approach. It was a relaxed approach, and the sheer joy was something I've never experienced and probably never will again. To see what it meant to Richmond fans who had. I've been here 10 years, but, lifelong supporters, and many people had, it'd been 37 years since the last premiership. Yep. To see Punt Road just heaving, Swan Street was just crazy. It was just great reward. And I guess when I look back on it was particularly great reward for Brendan, the CEO who'd toiled as a player for a long period of time and has overseen a lot of what's happened here over the last decade. And put out a really
bold plan.
He did.
Of saying this is what we're going to do. We're going to get 75,000 members. We're going to get flags. And there was a bit of commentary and snickering and really, is that going to happen? Yeah. It must have been a lot of validation for him personally.
Yeah, there were eyebrows raised everywhere. There's no doubt about that. He certainly put it on the line, and. I think it's, the last 2017, then 2019, it's just been great vindication, I think, of having a bold vision. And, that aligns with us as a football club, strong and bold. It was a bold vision, and to achieve the ultimate was just fantastic. And even for people like Peggy O'Neill, who've been around the club for a long time, the first female president in the history of the game, still the only female president in the history of the game, there were eyebrows raised then as well, This lady who was, born in the US and is now running Australia's biggest sporting club. There were people who did raise their eyebrows, but to see her and experience what we did, it was just wonderful.
I want to go back to a point when you said, especially experiencing 2017 and 2019, the importance of allowing your team to just be in the moment, it is advice that I've given teams that go into that big game where they're like, we've got to capture everything. We've got to take every photo. We've got to see every tweet. It is the big game and you want to cover it, but it's also like, take a breath.
Yep.
Like realise you're there because
Absolutely.
there's long hours in portable offices or cold days out of training where you're filming that this is the reward. And if you're not there is always that debate whether it's a Super Bowl or an AFL Grand Final. Go, oh no, the digital team and the media, they have to be covering everything. It's like, let the fans celebrate. Like we put the phone down and jump up and down and hug people. Yeah, because you're there that's why you're in sport.
Absolutely. I mean, you want them to enjoy it as much as the players do and the fans are. I mean, we are. We talk about united as a football club, and and we should enjoy the moment as much as each other, and we certainly did. We certainly did.
And it is funny also from a media cycle point of view, and it's similar in the NBA. After the NBA finals finish, they start looking at the draft. The AFL has now got this machine that's like, oh, the game's finished, and on the Monday they sort of say, here's the best players, here's who won the Norm Smith, and they start to talk trades. And like as a fan, you're like, hang on, I still want to watch the replay 17 more times and I want to hear all the stories. Yeah. Like that's the opportunity, I think, you have that space and then you go, oh, next week we're still telling all the stories and still connecting. Because the fans want to talk about the premiership until Christmas.
They do. They do. And look, the broader point you make there is just being really conscious of burnout too. Yeah. For your staff. I mean, they do wear a broad, broad structure. Yeah. And it's the workload that is undertaken at AFL clubs now, particularly with AFLW now coming on board as well. As you say, the 12 months a year, there's something major, 11 and a half of those months. So you do need to be conscious of that, and you do need to let your staff enjoy the moment.
Yeah. So you mentioned AFLW, and it was on the list. So the Tigers are now in the AFLW, the women's competition. First of all, it's now in its fourth year. Was there any, were you on the outside looking in? Did you want to be in at the beginning? Yeah. Why, and now you are in? What was that process? Because there was a lot of jostling for those initial spots.
Yeah, there was. We were. We were bitterly disappointed to miss out. Yep. Year one. We thought we'd put a pretty decent pitch to the AFL to be included in year one, and unfortunately it didn't go our way. Our pitch at the time, we felt a foundation of genuine commitment to gender equity was what a team needed to be built on. We thought that needed to be the building block. So that was central to our pitch to the AFL at the time. And, as I say, in terms of genuine commitment, we had the first female president. We'd done research projects with the Australian Sports Commission and the AFL into what it took to be best practice in terms of gender equity. We worked with Sex Discrimination Commissioner Liz Broderick to establish the Elite Sport Male Champions of Change. So we'd actually taken a leadership position on a lot of chunky pieces of work around the gender equity space, and rightly or wrongly, we felt that had us well positioned when it came to dishing out licences. Ultimately, it didn't work out, and that happens. So we dusted ourselves off and ultimately got the provisional licence and then the full licence to come in 2020. But it's been a breath of fresh air to have the women's team around. The freshness, the vibrancy that they create around a football club is fantastic. And we played our first official game last Friday night. 15,000 at the game. It had a wonderful atmosphere, and I guess to build your AFLW team from the ground up is a massive undertaking. Yeah, massive undertaking, and Kate Sheen's done a terrific job.
Because you've got to, it is building it from the start. It is, what does culture look like? How do they best integrate into the club? Yep. How do you reformat your rooms to make sure that this is where the women's team can operate out of? There's a lot to undertake to be part of it. But yeah, you're bringing the same endorsement of other teams that I've spoken to say it just brings a different dynamic to the club overall. Yeah, no, it does, and I think the challenge has been for us is how do we really work on connecting that playing group with our fan base. Yeah. And so that when they go to a game, I talk a lot about from this storyteller perspective. I want people barracking for the person, not the player. Yep. So very keen for them to actually, when they see someone, they actually have an affinity or a connection with that person. So
So we've looked at some of our content offerings, and something that we have done this year is we established a podcast series with Sam Lane.
Yep.
The Originals, which is 3 episodes in today, I think, into a 10-part series where we want to trace the journey in the development of the AFLW team, but we also wanted to spend 6 or 7 of those episodes really getting to know 6 or 7 of the players. So that
just to get that, to fast track that emotional investment.
Exactly, and I think that's really important that we do that, and do that early and do that as well as we possibly can.
Because there is a real strong community feel around AFLW overall. I think that has been driven by the players.
Yep.
And this is not a slight on like the men's team, but they are further away from the fans, whether it's because of the volume and the amount of interaction that they've sort of stepped back a little bit, whereas a lot of the AFLW players are connecting and chatting back with the fans, which is what the AFL players were doing, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
But the volume hasn't got there. So there's this opportunity from a content and, seeing them run around the boundary and take selfies after a game and all those kind of things that we remember many years ago. Like, that's where I think you've got real big opportunity. And you'll also be inviting in new fans that are just coming for the AFL Women Richmond team. Yeah,
which goes to that fan growth piece that we were talking about before. I mean, credit to the all clubs and all playing groups. They've been very open. They've allowed us to embed journalists with them in the week leading into round 1, and they've been very open to anything that we've suggested. They see the importance of that. But I mean, to your point before, that there is the knock-on for clubs from a facilities perspective is significant. It's particularly challenging here at Richmond with the Swinburne Centre. We're landlocked to a large degree, and one of our challenges at the moment is how do we redevelop this facility to properly accommodate women's football, to properly accommodate those evolving community programs that I mentioned earlier. And we think it's a $60 million project that is going to take some doing, but I think ultimately that's going to be a great benefit to the club.
Yeah, and again, being that both club focused but also servicing the community.
Absolutely.
So 2019, last year, you went up against the Giants.
Yes.
It was very much a family affair with your brother at the Giants. Did you speak during the week with the Tigers take on the Giants in the grand final?
We did speak a little bit during the week. I think it's fair to say we didn't talk much the following week or the following few weeks after we had a pretty comfortable win. But look, they've done a brilliant job, the Giants, and I was there. You won't want to hear this as a Collingwood fan, but I was there at the preliminary final, barracking very hard for the Giants because I obviously wanted David to experience a grand final, and the minute they got in and then we were in, it was a very different feeling because it's only one thing that matters the following Saturday. So.
And what did you do wrong with your parents backing the Giants?
Yes, it was. David's always been their favourite son. There's no doubt about that. It was. I went and saw Mum and Dad. They were sitting 2 bays away, and I ran out and saw them and extended family, and it was a sea of orange. So I don't know what I've done wrong there, but they were very much on the David bandwagon, and I think they probably felt that I'd managed to experience a premiership at Richmond 2 years ago. And
it's like we just want to play. Don't play favourites. We just want everyone to have one.
So I'm playing it up for all it's worth. That so, no, they did a great job to get there really, and they'll be very hard to beat again this year, I'm sure.
Yep. So the last thing, when we did talk a little bit about before around, I guess, how the media landscape has changed and controlling the pieces. How do you manage like the balance of what the press is reporting and what the scuttlebutt and that has more volume these days through social media and stuff like that? Like you have a major player like Alex Rance retiring, and everybody and every pundit wants to come out with a reason and have all of these things fly around, but how do you manage that from a club point of view? Because addressing it validates all the lies and rumours and innuendo, but it's out there. How do you manage those kind of things?
Yeah, it's frustrating when particularly with the Alex Rance situations, and a couple of things aligned, and people added some things up and just jumped to ridiculous conclusions, and then there was this swirl of innuendo and
Yep.
and just outright garbage.
Yeah, and it was all like around Christmas, so it was Christmas lunch banter.
Exactly.
And it was, people just making stuff up.
Yeah.
That then it gets passed on to another mate, and then 3 times later it starts sounding like, oh yeah, that sounds real. But it's hard for the club to address it because it just makes people further go down the rabbit hole, and it just says, oh, you're just trying to manage it, but it's like it's not real. So it's like, how do you?
You do nothing, to be honest. I mean, we did talk about it at the time, and I was getting texts from friends and family saying what's going on with Alex and etc. And but to your point before, the minute you comment on this stuff, you validate it, and then where do you stop and start with every rumour that pops up in social media? We decided that the best action was just to ignore it and treat it for what it was, which was just garbage.
And that's the thing. You've just got to give it no oxygen, because as soon as it gets a little bit, then then the talkback radio, it goes, oh, well, we can talk about it now.
That's right.
Right? And then it goes longer, and it also points to, oh, this is where we're going to start digging. And, like, that's the media cycle, which is, hey, we're trying for clicks. Yep. So if someone does an Instagram post, we're going to put it in an article, and we'll try. Like, that's the game they're all in. They're trying to get clicks, but it is really tough from a club point of view, because your hands are tied.
Well, you end up throwing fuel on it. It's just not worth it. And ultimately, it's gone away as it should have, and it's being seen for what it is. Yeah.
So then the other side of it is, how do you then throw fuel on the stuff you want and like allow the fans to amplify? Hey, this is the best thing. How do you get that balance right? Because you've got, this digital cheer squad is what I call, like to say, here's this great content, whether it's, the originals, the podcast, which is sort of going out organically, but that will be growing from a word of mouth point of view.
Yeah. Oh, you stretch that stuff as far as you can in as many different ways as you can. So, whether it's using some of your influences to push stuff out, which can help stretch it as well. So, there's lots of ways to get those great stories out there in a more significant way than they otherwise might be.
Terrific. So, Simon, Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I do. I grew up a Geelong fan, and Dad took me to Cardinia Park to watch the Cats. I think they were playing Footscray, if I remember rightly, and was at the Barwon River end of the ground at Cardinia Park, and Larry Donoghue, I think, was playing full forward for Geelong, and Paul Serra was my favourite player, the Ferret. Okay. Number 13, so that was my first
like
memory.
Mickey Turner type
there's
era.
A young Mickey
Maybe
Turner.
Neville Bruns might have been playing at that stage.
Brunsy might have been a little bit later, but that was my first memory, and it was Cardinia Park was very different to what it is today.
Oh, very, very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
You would have been to a few footy events and sports events over your time. Do you have a favourite food or a go-to food or a favourite food memory?
I struggle to walk past a good hot dog, I must say, and which you'd find very easy to believe if you have a look at me. So, probably the hot dog I think is my go-to. Yeah,
the hot dog or the party pies is normally a favourite. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Twitter.
Twitter,
yeah. Just the news, straight to the news feed, just to find out what's going on around the world. So that's where I'd be setting up shop first thing.
Is there someone that you either follow on Twitter or read, or a colleague that you follow that the podcast listeners should follow and check out?
I'm sure you've probably chatted to him before, but he's a guy I used to work with at Essendon Football Club, Jonathan Simpson.
Yep.
Who is very, very switched on around the social media space. So he's a guy that I do follow closely and catch up with regularly just to bounce stuff off.
Yep. Terrific. And then what social media platform is your MVP? You can answer this as yourself and, like, what's your personal favourite, but then, like, what's the platform that's working well for the Tigers?
I think for us, it's quite clearly Instagram. I imagine that's a regular response.
Yep.
You get, we're I think we're up over 240,000 now. I think the imagery is so powerful. I think from a marketing perspective, talking about the storyteller, which we've chatted about a little bit, I think the imagery is really critical to that. So I think
the fact it's now that it is two products in one, like you can tell the pictorial story through your feed and have a specific lens to that, and it allows you to tell the player story, the club, the redevelopment, what the women's team is doing and all that kind of stuff. But then you also got the largely unfiltered, insider access of the Insta story and go, hey, guess what? the Coburg, they're now running out at Coburg, or hey, they're training at Punt Road, or we're now at a camp at a school, and that hey, I'm on the shoulder of a player. That insider access is all social networks have always been asking for,
and players enjoy it.
It is a platform they're going to,
and they can have fun with it, which I think is great, and it takes people where they can't go. And I think the other thing with Instagram, from our perspective, is of all our platforms, and it might be similar across the board, is that it's closest in terms of gender parity.
Yeah.
So it actually is taking you to a more equitable audience, which I think is really important for us.
Yeah, and it is providing just a really different way to consume like a day. And you're right, it's because the players are leaning into it so much, and it is how the fans are consuming and also amplifying that, hey, I'm at the G, the Tigers won, my daughter was at the first AFLWs behind the goals, and the goal goes through, and, go Tigers. Like, that's how everyone's sort of sharing their experience. What are the best ways for people who are listening to the podcasts to send you a message to say, hey, Simon, I listen to the podcasts? Well,
Twitter, given that's where I spend every morning, so at Simon Tigers, or LinkedIn, or probably just through the old email.
Sorry, you don't want to send a fax number?
That's where it all started, mate. My first press release at Essendon was a fax, but don't think we'd even find one now.
No, exactly, yeah. For people who don't know what a fax is, you can Google it. Simon, thanks for coming on the podcast, and all the best for the season ahead.
Pleasure, Sean.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Simon Matthews. You can connect with him on LinkedIn, Simon Matthews, Richmond Football Club, when you do look him up. But as he said there, he is avid on the Twitter, and we'll be checking his tweets. So send him a tweet, Simon Tigers, Tiges, on Twitter, and tell him that you listen to the podcast. What do you think of the content and the stories that they're sharing from Richmond? And maybe if you listen to the new Richmond AFL Women's podcast, The Originals, with Sam Lane. Send him a tweet. Let him know that you listen. And please do that for all guests. If you have been listening to the podcast and you really appreciated the time, the insight, the strategies and tactics that my guests have shared, please reach out to them and say thank you. It really means a lot. It really validates what I'm doing, and really... it's really, really appreciated. I'm going to chuck a few more reelies in there. So before I wrap up, just a bit of an update, I guess, moving into February of 2020, and the year is flying fast. Very busy behind the scenes. Obviously, keeping the podcast up and running, having an esports team going okay at the minute. With Gravitas, you can follow all things Gravitas at gravitas.gg, but just give you an update of some of the different work and projects that we're working on at the minute. We're just completing some work with the SANFL, the South Australian Football League, around and use digital to dollars to sort of analyse what they're doing in the digital space and how it can flow into their OTT product as they launch their digital pass with a wider offering than they did from previous years. So it's been really interesting to work with them and sort of help them frame what their content strategy is going forward and how they can best leverage platforms to drive that outcome. I'm really happy to start working with Team Novo Nordisk, which is a cycling team made up completely by athletes with diabetes. So it's all about diabetes awareness. And so we're really working on audience and engagement strategy on how they engage a global audience. So they've got a massive footprint across Facebook, and it's really about how do they push the message of diabetes awareness and how we can leverage Facebook the best, and also diving into engagement and growth on Instagram. So really excited to kick off work with them on the NRL front. Continuing our work with the South Sydney Rabbitohs. They've been a long-time client and looking to expand what they're doing in the digital content offering to their sponsors, and really at the pointy end of the digital to dollars process where they can really pitch some really cool ideas to sponsors to get them to bite down on that, knowing that the team at the Rabbitohs can deliver. Also working with in the NRL front, about to kick off some content workshops with the Melbourne Storm. So looking forward to working with the Storm again and their team and looking at what they can do to sort of push the boundaries of what their team can do, as well as serve the purpose from a commercial point of view and a ticketing point of view, but really see what they can do when they're pushing the boundaries of content. I'm working with Matt Scully and the guys at Sports Ram. They're starting to build out their club network internationally, and being able to offer ticketing options to clubs and really allow teams to tap into that tourist market. Sports Ram does a really good job of helping tourists get tickets and take in experiences when they're probably not thinking of that. They're not the diehard fans, but they're definitely people who want to tick off a bucket list experience. So if you're a club that wants to be integrated into the product and into the platform, please reach out. I think it is a really big opportunity, especially for those tourist markets, and also some of the add-on options that the Sports Ram guys are offering. So I spoke about esports before, starting to do some consulting in the space, working with the Emporium Melbourne, which is a shopping centre here in Melbourne, and they've got a large esports venue called Fortress opening up very soon. So we've been helping them align their marketing and efforts around what they're doing to talk to and reach the gamer and esports market. So it's always good to be in that space to educate new brands about what the opportunities are there. As I said earlier, we're working in a previous episode, we're working with Football West on the club digital education program. So we've done 3 of the webinars now, talking to clubs at grassroots level around what they can do from an audience, content, sponsorship point of view. I'm looking forward to completing that work and refining how we deliver that as a webinar to grassroots. I'm also helping a mate launch his second book. Mark Labuska's launching his second book, so doing a refresh of his digital presence and making sure he's capturing all of the opportunities there. So it's good to be working with Mark as well. And then also, sort of more on a personal front than a work front, I am planning my return to the stand-up stage. So I'm going to be performing at the School of Hard Knock Knocks alumni show at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. I really enjoyed it last time. It is really going to be something I'm going to have to set some time aside to write some jokes and to get myself into that mindset. Fittingly, the gig is going to be on April 1st. So if you're in Melbourne on April 1st, which is, yes, it is April Fool's Day. It's not an April Fool's joke. I will be performing stand-up again. So if you want to come along, have a laugh at my expense, please do so. I'll be sharing those links shortly. But yeah, that's some of the work that we've got going on behind the scenes when I'm not podcasting or not running an esports team. So if you're interested in anything along those lines, or if you just want to have a chat about how I can help your team, you can do so just by a Pick My Brain session. You can literally book in a 2-hour session and we can dive in deep on your issues. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. But if you just want to have a chat, a call to discuss what we can do, you can also just go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call and let's have a chat, find out how we can help you reach your goals and drive more revenue from what you're doing in the digital space. Until next week, please don't forget, send in your questions for the Q&A episodes, sportsgeekhq.com/questions. If you've got a question, either rising out of a conversation from the guest or from anything that I've mentioned on a podcast or something I may have tweeted, please send them in. We are planning to have those Q&A episodes out every Friday. It does help when I have questions at the ready to record an episode. And always, you can support these efforts, this podcast, and what I'm doing in this space by going to Patreon, sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. You can do so for as little as $4 a month. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.